The gardener found the phone on a Tuesday morning, half buried under the frost-stiffened leaves near the back fence. He almost didn't pick it up. Owen McTavish had been tending the grounds of the Fenwick estate for 11 years, and in those 11 years he had learned one rule above all others. What didn't belong to him was not his concern. A dropped glove, a forgotten scarf, a child's toy left out in the rain. He would set these things on the stone wall beside the kitchen door and say nothing. That was the arrangement. That was how things stayed quiet. But this was different. The phone screen had cracked clean across the middle, and when he turned it over, it lit up, still charged, still alive. A message notification sat on the lock screen, bright and impossible to miss, from a contact saved only as B. It's done, tonight. Don't be home. Owen stood there in the cold November air with the phone in his hand, and the frosted leaves crunching under his boots, and he read those words 3 times. Then he looked up at the house. The lights in the kitchen were already on. Through the window he could see Mrs. Fenwick moving between the counter and the stove, unhurried, calm, wearing her good cream blouse on a Tuesday morning for no reason Owen could name. He put the phone in his coat pocket and went back to work. Stuart Fenwick was 63 years old, and he had spent the better part of 4 decades building something from nothing. That was how he described it when he gave speeches at fundraising dinners and industry luncheons in Ottawa and Toronto. Something from nothing. Though the truth, as most truths are, was more complicated than a dinner speech. He'd had a good education, a sharp mind, and the particular stubbornness of a man who grew up watching his father lose money with the same confidence other men made it. He had promised himself he would never be that. He had kept the promise. Fenwick Legal Group had started as 2 lawyers in a rented office above a dry cleaner on Elgin Street. Now it occupied the top 3 floors of a glass tower overlooking the Rideau Canal, employed 68 people, and had a client list that included 3 provincial governments and a crown corporation. Stuart had not made himself rich on billable hours alone. He had also invested carefully, diversified early, and acquired several properties in the valley before land prices climbed. The estate outside Almonte had been one of those acquisitions. He'd bought it for the tax advantage and ended up loving it in a way he hadn't expected. He drove out most weekends. In the summer, he walked the property in the evenings. In the winter, he sat by the fire in the main room with a book he rarely finished and a glass of something he always did. His wife, Claudette, had grown to love it too, eventually. She had redecorated twice, updated the kitchen, added a greenhouse along the south wall. She called it our place, and when she said it, she meant it. And Stuart had believed for a long time that this was enough, that shared ownership of something beautiful was a kind of love, even if it wasn't the original kind. He drove out that Tuesday afternoon alone. Claudette had called that morning to say she was staying in the city. A dinner with her sister, she said, and he had said fine, drive carefully, and meant nothing in particular by it. The drive from Ottawa took 45 minutes in light traffic. He pulled through the iron gate just after 4, when the light was going low and orange over the fields. Owen's truck was still parked by the equipment shed. Stuart parked beside it and walked to the front door, and that was when Owen stepped out from the side of the house and said quietly but directly, "Mr. Fenwick, don't go in yet, please." Stuart stopped. Owen McTavish was not a dramatic man. He was 61, built like someone who had spent his life doing physical work, which he had first on his family's farm near Carleton Place, then in landscaping, then in private grounds management. He did not speak unnecessarily. He did not perform concern. When he was worried, he went quiet. Stuart had known him for 11 years, and he recognized the expression on his face now as something he had never seen there before. "What is it?" Owen reached into his coat pocket and held out the phone. "I found this morning," he said. "Back fence, east corner, under the leaves. Still had charge." Stuart took it. The cracked screen lit up when he touched it, and there were the words, exactly as Owen had read them 6 hours earlier, sitting on the lock screen in plain sight. "It's done. Tonight. Don't be home." The message was from a contact called B. Stuart read it. "Read it again." The cold came in more sharply than it had a moment before. "You found this on the property," he said. "Yes, sir. This morning." "Yes, sir. I didn't know what to do with it. I didn't want to call you while you were driving." Owen paused. "I looked at the number in the contact. I don't know whose it is, but the phone itself, the case on it, it's the kind Mrs. Fenwick uses. The silicone kind with the flower pattern. I've seen her with one. I could be wrong." Stuart looked at the case. Pale blue silicone with small white flowers pressed into the surface. He knew it. He had seen it 100 times on the kitchen counter, on the coffee table, on the passenger seat of her car. He handed the phone back to Owen. His hand was steady. "Don't touch anything inside," he said. "Don't come in tonight. Are you sure you should be here alone, sir?" Stuart looked at the house. The windows were dark. The side door was locked. Nothing moved in the fields or along the tree line. "I'm not going in," he said. "Not yet." He walked back to his car, sat in the driver's seat, and stared at the gate for a long time. He had been a lawyer long enough to know the difference between knowing something and proving it. Knowing it sat in his chest like a stone. Cold, solid, already settled. Proving it was a different matter entirely. He had seen men act on what they knew without being able to prove it. And he had watched them lose everything in the process. Their cases, their credibility, sometimes their freedom. He was not going to make that mistake. He called his associate, a man named Declan, who had worked with him for 14 years and who Stewart trusted with a particular category of problem. Not legal problems, but real ones. Declan answered on the second ring. "I need something," Stewart said. Quietly. "Where are you?" "Almonte." "At the property? Alone?" "Owen's here." "Declan, I need you to run a number for me, and I need you to not ask me why until I'm ready to tell you." There was a brief pause. "Send it." Stewart photographed the contact on the cracked phone and sent the image to Declan's number. Then he sat in the car as the last light drained out of the sky. The name attached to the number came back in 40 minutes. Marcus Breer, 44 years old. Originally from London, Ontario. Currently self-employed, listed as a security consultant. One prior charge, assault stayed, an address in Gatineau. Stewart recognized the name the way you recognize something you've never seen before but somehow understand. Completely and immediately. Marcus Breer had worked for 6 months as personal security for a development company that Stewart's firm had done work for 3 years ago. That was all. That was the whole connection. Except that somewhere in those 6 months, something had happened that Stewart hadn't known about. He called Declan back. "Find out everything you can about Marcus Breer," he said. "His finances, his movements, who he's been in contact with. I need it in writing." "Stewart," Declan said carefully, "should I be concerned?" "Not yet. I'll tell you when you should be." He sat in the car another hour, not calling the police, not going inside, not calling Claudette. He thought about the dinner with her sister. He thought about whether the sister knew. He thought about the greenhouse along the south wall which Claudette had chosen herself and supervised every step of construction, and which he had paid for without complaint because he thought it meant she was happy here. The thing about 31 years of marriage is that it accumulates evidence constantly. Small evidence, ordinary evidence, the kind you don't catalog because you're not expecting a case. But when you start looking backward with different eyes, the evidence rearranges itself. The weeks she had been distant, the trips she had taken alone described vaguely, the phone she kept face down, the way she had stopped asking about his schedule. He had not wanted to see it. That was different from not seeing it. He spent the night at a hotel in Perth. He told no one where he was. In the morning, he called his daughter, Marlo. Marlo Fenwick was 34 and worked in forensic accounting in Vancouver. She was the more careful of his 2 children, the one who had inherited his habit of moving slowly before moving at all. His son Garrett was 31 and impulsive, and was currently somewhere in Portugal, which was not relevant to anything except that Stewart couldn't call him, without the conversation becoming chaotic. "Dad," Marlo said when she answered, and then, immediately, "What's wrong?" "I need to talk to you about something, and I need you to stay calm while I do." He told her about the phone, about the message, about Marcus Breer. He did not tell her what he thought it meant, because he was a lawyer and he didn't speculate aloud until he had evidence. He just told her the facts. Marlo was quiet for almost a full minute after he finished. "You didn't call the police," she said. "Not yet, Dad. I know what you're going to say." "Then why are you telling me instead of calling them?" "Because I need someone who knows how to read financial records to tell me what they find before I walk into a police station and make an accusation I can't support." He paused. "And because I needed to tell someone I trusted." Another silence. Then, "What do you need from me?" "Access to everything she can access. Everything in our joint accounts, our shared investments, the property holdings. I need to know if there's been movement, transfers, withdrawals, anything structured to look ordinary. That's going to take time. I know. And if I find something." Then I call Declan, and Declan calls someone he trusts at the RCMP. "And we do this correctly. And if you're wrong?" Stewart was quiet for a moment. The hotel room was beige and anonymous and smelled faintly of the cleaning products they use in places where many people have passed through. "Then I'm wrong," he said. "But I'm not wrong." 3 days passed. Stewart stayed at the hotel, drove to his Ottawa office during the day, answered Claudette's texts with short, reassuring replies about needing to clear his head, which was the kind of answer she would have expected from him under ordinary circumstances. He felt the distance between what was true and what he was saying like a physical pressure behind his ribs. Declan's contact confirmed what the phone had already suggested. Marcus Breer had received 2 wire transfers in the past 30 days, one for $12,000. one for 8, from a numbered company registered in New Brunswick. It took Declan's contact 2 more days to trace the numbered company back to a name. Stewart already knew. The name Claudette had used for her personal investments since before they were married. She had moved $340,000 in the past 4 months. The policy on Stewart's life, the one he had taken out when the firm first expanded, the one with Claudette as sole beneficiary, was worth $1.2 million. Marlowe called him the morning the last piece came together. "Dad," she said. Her voice was careful and very even, the way voices get when the speaker is working hard not to let them do something else. "I have everything. I'm sending it to you now. Thank you. Are you going to be okay?" He looked out the window of his office at the canal, gray-green under the November sky. A jogger passed below, headphones in, breath steaming. "Yes," he said. "I need you to promise me you're calling the police today. I'm calling Declan now." "Not Declan. The police, Dad. The actual police." He understood what she was telling him. He had been moving carefully, building the case the way he knew how, the way that had protected him for 40 years. The slow accumulation, the documented foundation, the unassailable file. But Marlowe was right that this was not a civil matter or a contract dispute. This was something different. "Today," he said. "I'll fly in tomorrow." "You don't have to." "I know I don't have to," she said. "I'm going to." He called Declan first anyway because Declan knew the right people and the right people needed to be the right people. By the end of that afternoon, the financial records and Declan's contact information had been passed to a detective at the Ottawa Police Service named Chen, who called Stewart directly within the hour and spoke to him for 45 minutes in a tone that was professional and careful and made Stewart understand that he was being believed. They asked him to stay out of the property. He had already been doing that. They asked him not to contact Claudette about this matter. He had already been doing that too. He spent that night in the hotel again, and somewhere around 2 in the morning he stopped trying to sleep and sat in the chair by the window and let himself feel, in the quiet and the dark, the full weight of what the past week had contained. Not the legal weight, he had processed that. The other kind, the kind that doesn't fit into documents or timelines. 31 years, the greenhouse, the way she set our place. The way he had believed her, and the way that belief had not been stupidity but faith, which is a different thing, and no less real for having been misplaced. He didn't let himself stay there long. There was still work to do. Detective Chen moved efficiently. On Friday morning, 4 days after Stewart had first sat in his car outside the estate with a cracked phone in his hands, Marcus Breer was picked up at his apartment in Gatineau. The initial charge was conspiracy to commit murder. He gave up the contact information for the intermediary within 3 hours, and by Friday afternoon, the whole arrangement was on the table. The timeline, the method, the communications, the money. Claudette was arrested at a restaurant in the Glebe, where she had been having lunch with her sister. Her sister had not known. Stewart received the call from Detective Chen at 2:47 in the afternoon. He was in his office. He thanked the detective, set the phone down on his desk, and sat very still for several minutes. Through the glass wall of the conference room across the hall, he could see 2 of his associates working at a table covered in documents, speaking to each other in low voices, not noticing him. The ordinary machinery of the day going on exactly as it always did. His phone rang again almost immediately. It was Marlowe, calling from Pearson, just landed. "I heard," she said. "Declan called me. Where are you?" "Baggage. I'll be there in an hour." A pause. "How are you doing, Dad?" It was such a direct question. He had spent 40 years becoming a man who answered questions precisely and did not offer more than was asked, but Marlowe had always had the ability to make that habit fall away. "I don't know yet," he said. "I'll let you know when I do." That's an honest answer. I'm trying. Owen McTavish went to the estate that Saturday morning as usual, because the grounds didn't stop needing attention because a man's life had nearly ended there. He raked the last of the leaves along the east fence, the same stretch where he'd found the phone a week and a half ago. The frost had come again overnight, and the grass was white at the edges, and the air smelled like the particular cold of late November in the Ottawa Valley. Clean and thin and final, the last exhale before winter settled in completely. Stewart drove out that afternoon, alone, as he often did. He didn't go inside immediately. He walked the perimeter of the property the way he used to on summer evenings, though the light was different now and the fields were bare. He found Owen near the greenhouse, wrapping the rose bushes along the south wall in burlap for the winter. "Mr. Fenwick," Owen said, straightening up. "Owen." Stewart looked at the greenhouse, the glass catching the low afternoon light. "How are the plants in there?" "Fine, sir. The tomatoes are done, but the herbs are still going. I've been keeping the heat on." Stewart nodded. He stood there a moment, his hands in his coat pockets, looking at the glass. "I want to thank you," he said, "for doing what you did. For not just setting that phone on the wall by the kitchen door. Owen was quiet for a moment. He pulled off one work glove and looked at it. I almost did, he said, honestly. It's what I would have done with anything else. What made you decide differently? Owen thought about it. He was not a man who answered questions without meaning to. I don't know exactly, he had said finally. I think it was the way the message was worded. Don't be home. That's not something you say unless you know something bad is going to happen. In a place. He paused. I figured if I was wrong, you'd think I was a fool for a few minutes and then forget about it. But if I was right, you were right. Yes, sir. They stood together in the cold, the rose bushes wrapped in burlap against the coming winter, the greenhouse warm and green behind the glass. My daughter's coming out for the weekend, Stuart said. She'd like to see the property. Properly, I mean not just the house. I'll be here, Owen said. Stuart nodded again and started back toward the house. He paused once, halfway across the lawn, and turned back. 11 years, he said. I don't think I've ever properly said it. You've done good work here. You do good work. Owen looked at him for a moment. Then he bent back down to the rose bushes, pulling the burlap around the base of the canes. Thank you, Mr. Fenwick, he said. Same time Monday, then. Stuart walked the rest of the way to his house and unlocked the front door and stepped inside. The rooms were cold and still and entirely his. He stood in the hallway for a moment with his coat still on, listening to the silence. Then he went to the thermostat, turned the heat on, and walked to the kitchen to make himself a cup of coffee. Through the window above the sink, he could see Owen still working along the south wall, small against the wide gray sky, moving steadily from one rose bush to the next. The greenhouse light was warm and green behind him, and the field stretched out pale and quiet all the way to the tree line. Stuart watched him for a long moment. Then he turned away and put the kettle on, and the ordinary sounds of the house came back around him. The tick of the pipes, the low hum of the refrigerator, the kettle beginning its slow climb toward boiling, and he stood there in the kitchen of the home that was only his now, and let them.